Hello, and welcome to Business 120. I'm Ellen Foley, and I'll be your instructor for the next 8 weeks. I can't think of a better time to be studying business and economics. The presidential campaign has turned the spotlight on many different ways to run an economy. COVID has thrown a monkey wrench into the profits of our businesses that give us jobs and help us maintain our livelihoods. The protests against racial inequality have reminded us that American business has a long way to go before it achieves justice. In a minute, I'll start the Chapter 1 lecture. Just a short reminder that you need to do your first day assignments before you come to the first class. It will help us have a richer experience. Okay, here comes Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Here are the topics that we're going to talk about today. What is business? How is the U.S. economy doing? What are the measures of our economic health? And what does the future look like in this new century? You can't get away from business. It's all around us, as this picture shows us. But what exactly is business? Here we have it defined as the organized effort of individuals to produce and sell for profit goods and services. You'll see in the boxes below the pillars of our course. We will meet these concepts again and again: human resources, material resources, informational resources, and financial resources. Let's talk about the types of economic systems. The first is capitalism, and we're familiar with that phrase, aren't we? It's defined as a system in which individuals own and operate most businesses. The alternative is socialism and command economies. Socialism has a particular flavor in that it allows for people to choose their jobs, and some small businesses are allowed to flourish. In other command economies, such as communism, there's a different way of doing business, and that involves the citizens themselves together owning the economic resources. You may not be able to choose your job in a communist system. North Korea is an example of such a system. And of course, many of the former Soviet countries regard themselves as communist. The United States economy is a mixture of both of these, and that may surprise you. In our country, stakeholders, including households, businesses, and government, together and separately, decide what we will produce, how we will do it, for whom we will do it. They decide who owns and who controls the major factors of production, and we allow government to provide us services and resources. For example, jobless citizens get unemployment benefits. Those come from our taxes, and the government decides how much those benefits should be. And if you're following the news right now, which is mid-September as I'm recording this, you'll understand that this is quite a big conversation. The Congress, Democrat versus Republican, is not sure how much an unemployed person should get in benefits. Here's a graphic from your textbook. And you don't need to memorize this. It's a little busy, but I wanted you to see how complex this set of relationships is. There are many layers here. For example, you can see that households, markets, businesses, product makers, they all send taxes to the government that then sends out those taxes as benefits and grants and incentives to keep our economy going. We measure our economy's health with basically three measures. Productivity, which is basically how much work an employee can get done in a certain amount of time. It's a good metric for those who are employed, but not such a good one for those who are unemployed. By far and large, the most famous is gross domestic product. It can be controversial because we're not quite sure what it's measuring. However, as you can see in graphs that we study in our course, GDP has risen steadily for the past 20 to 40 years. The more dynamic metric is the unemployment rate. And we can see the effect of COVID here overall. In January of this year, the unemployment rate was 3.6%. In April, it spiked to 14.7%, which was the worst since the Great Depression and a reaction to the lockdown about COVID. In July, when the lockdown was lifted, there was an employment surge, and the unemployment rate dropped to 10.2%. Here is a chart on how the gross domestic product continues to grow. Our business cycle has 4 phases. We are right now in the recession phase. The stock market keeps teasing us with whether or not we're going into a recovery phase. Just this week, the market dropped significantly in a correction over tech stocks. So I'm not sure it's going to be leading us into a recovery until we have a vaccine and better testing for COVID. What really is a shame is that typically in this time when we have a normal cycle, we head down into the recession. And when we get to the trough, that's when businesses start to talk about what do we need to do to get into recovery? What do we need to buy? How many employees should we hire? We're moving forward and we're moving fast. With the COVID economy, it's too confusing and people don't know if it's going to end soon or whether it will be lengthy. The COVID effect on our economy is very deep. 30 million Americans have filed for unemployment, and more than 100,000 small business people have gone out of business permanently. We got some good news in that post-July, 1.4 million jobs were added after the COVID lockdown was lifted. That's still just 76% of the pre-COVID economy. We have a ways to go. What are the challenges of the kind of economy that the Americans are so proud of? When it works well, it's the best. We have a large number of jobs. We have the gold standard in living standards. And there are many opportunities for personal advancement. When it doesn't work so well, we have the Great Depression of the 1930s. There have been other economic dips, one in the 70s and one in the 80s. The recession of 2009 was very serious and required a lot of government help to correct it. And now, as we have said in the past few slides, COVID is giving us a lot of confusing signals. The challenges ahead involve serious questions. How can we create a more stable economy? How do we sustain our environment? This week, the pundit wrote a very interesting article that the challenges in the next 10 years aren't going to involve new strains of viruses or other kinds of warfare. They're going to involve environmental change and how those hard to predict changes will affect our economy. As I record this, there are a multitude of California forest fires that have spread into the states of Oregon and Washington. Many believe this is the result of climate change. And as we have seen in the protests in the last few months, we need to resolve social unrest, discrimination, and inequality. Those problems, if not resolved, can hurt our economy. So what is this new century going to offer? We know some of the negatives. We've talked a lot today about COVID. We've mentioned the social unrest. And from those things comes a political uncertainty that covers all areas of government, national, state, and local. Are we going to charge higher taxes to solve some of these problems? Almost 50% of our voters don't like that idea. Are we going to shrink business and have massive layoffs in order to keep resources at the current levels and not raise taxes? That doesn't sound like a great outcome either. We will have discussions when I see you in class about several issues that I'm going to just quickly go over here. One of them is whether the tech giants are monopolies. Apple is being investigated right now by the government. Microsoft was sued in 1998 and was indeed found to be a monopoly. However, that didn't change much, did it? So this will be an interesting discussion. We will also look at the current business environment, and I would love to talk about how you are doing and how you are finding the tools that we are using in this course. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for sticking with me, and we'll see you in class. Bye-bye.